evening and welcome to PM Express Business Edition. It's finally here. Negotiations for economic program for Ghana will start from Monday, September 26th. But what are Ghana's chances of securing a favorable deal or a program with the IMF looking at our current situation? Can we negotiate from a position of strength or weakness? Well, I am going to engage some very, very important persons who matter in this our economic space as we prepare to negotiate with the IMF for a fund program. Ken Thompson is Chief Executive of Dalex Company. From the business perspective, what are the businessmen looking forward to for this fund program? Sir Tekpe is a former Minister of Finance, a technocrat. He has been at the table before negotiating with the IMF. How are we going to get a good program? From a perspective of somebody who has been there before and also someone who has worked with the IMF and is still consulting for the fund. And Professor Godfrey Bokpeng is a finance lecturer and an economist. Let's look into the eyes of an economist and see whether indeed we can get something good. Well, all these issues wrapped up on PM Express as we look at the IMF negotiations. Can Ghana get a good deal? We take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the IMF negotiations or program negotiations and whether Ghana can indeed get a good deal. Some will say it is finally here. And today, as we talk about the IMF, we're going out for a 1 hour, 30 minutes discussion, more of a special discussion because it has to do with the IMF program. And as I told you earlier on, I've been joined by distinguished personalities in their areas of operations. Sir Tekpe is a former Minister of Finance. He's worked for the fund and continues to consult for the fund. We'll be getting his thoughts and get into a program like this and also gauge his thought from the perspective of the IMF in during these challenging times as well. Professor Godfrey Bokpeng is an economist. He's joining us. And also Ken Thompson. He is Chief Executive of Dalex Finance. But let me start first with you, Mr. Thompson. I mean, how are our businesses, how are you guys doing now? Quite an interesting time, some would say.
Good evening. Well, what do you say interesting? I'm not sure what interesting means.
Okay.
I think things have happened very quickly. What I know is that, they say inflation is what, 30-something%?
Yeah, 33.99%, correct, yeah.
In my pocket, it feels more like 80. My pocket feels more like 80.
That is interesting.
Yeah, in my pocket it feels more like 80. I mean, if you take the cost of basic things, frozen foods, I got some figures here. January 2022, 120 cedis, now is 250 cedis. That is a 108% increase. That's frozen food, frozen chicken. Royal aroma rice, 5 kg, 32 cedis to 58 cedis, 81% increase. Fried oil, 16% to 30 cedis. That's an 88% increase. And all the things I haven't asked is pure water, salt, pepper, tomatoes. So inflation is for me in my pocket. And I'm not disputing what the statistical service.
They're looking at the national average and all the rest there.
In my pocket, it is more like 80. And then, for as a company, we pay for our IT services. Most of them are in dollar.
Why is it denominated in dollars?
Okay. So if you're paying AWS for a cloud service, you've got to pay in dollars. I mean, they don't take CDs. Well, you can pay CDs, but eventually it gets dollars. I mean, that's almost doubled. So inflation, for me in my pocket, is over 80%. Over 80%.
And the question some would ask is that, how are you managing? Well, I mean, some would say that you've seen these things before, but maybe now it could be bad or worse or something.
I mean, so for me, I mean, let's take me out of it because I'll almost say I'm privileged. I have a small family. But for the young people, it's a challenge. So for business, this erosion of purchasing power means that they have very little to spend. So it's a challenge for business because businesses, the people that, with money to spend, now the money is worth much less.
Yeah.
So they're not able to patronize business as much as they would. And then you have interest rates going north. First you can't you don't you can't borrow, and if you borrow, it's very expensive. So it's a serious problem, real serious problem. I mean, these times are hard, and I don't know how the whole church put it. I mean, times really, really are hard. When people say that it's IMF going to get good deals.
Yeah, I'll be coming back to get your thought as a businessman. But let me bring in Honorable Setekpe, former Minister of Finance, is consulted for the IMF and is still consulting for the IMF. But Mr. Setekpe, I want you to help me out. IMF 101, negotiations 101. Monday, all other things being equal, we're going to start engaging the fund officially for a program. Now, tell me, what goes into this? And breaking it down for me, 101, we've had that. Have we had the technical guys do the work already? Ghana is talking about enhanced domestic program. The IMF says that now we want a homegrown program coming from countries to support. Can you break it down? Being there before as a finance minister, get into a program like this, how? Help us here. If you can unmute, I'll be so grateful, Mr. Tepe, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, and good evening to your viewers. Let me say that from your introduction, we should be looking for a fair program. There might not be much difference between a good and a fair program. And I say this because we all know the situation. We have been discussing the situation already as Ghanaians. And so what is required is candidness and transparency, with ourselves. Because when you are going into any negotiations, it's not unlike the business negotiation. Of course, as you alluded, you have to be prepared yourself, and you know the positions. But the negotiating partner also knows the situations. If you go to beginning critically from Article 4, 2019, a short while after we exited, which was issued in November. And remember, we exited around April and promised never to go back to the fund. That started a major correction by the fund of what was in the ECF, the latter stages of the ECF. Let me give you two examples. Our deficit was revised from, 3.9, 4.5, 5.3, however you like, to 7% to 7.5%, and then it kept going up, and we have never gone below 10%. So the fund started these revisions with that critical Article 4 at the time, November, when we were reading the 2020 budget. Then it continued with, remember, then COVID came and the RCF came in, and the RCF, meaning the COVID loan. If you look at the COVID loan report, it shows that we had a fiscal gap of between 3 to 5%, contrary to what we've been telling ourselves as doing fiscal consolidation. Now, let me fast forward. If you read Article 4, 2021, it gives you every detail that is wrong with the economy already, from arrears to stagnant revenues, difficulty with financing, which we know. Pretty now we can go into some of these details. Bank of Ghana finance, the government in 2020, we attributed it to COVID, to the tune of 10 billion, which was quite significant. That's the equivalent of 1.7 billion. And mind you, that's larger than the 1 billion we got from the IMF. Now, if you take all the inflows for COVID, which is estimated between 5.5 and 6 billion, Ghana cedis, depending on the conversions you make US dollars, which is more than half of what GRA is bringing in, all flowing between 2020 and 2021. Quite significant. And yet still in 2022 and going to 2023, we are in this difficulty.
No, sorry to cut in, but we'll get into those fine details. Yes. But I wanted you to run us through, just before we get into those details, what goes into negotiations, the two parties. I mean, you've been there before. You were at the fund and you're still consulting for the fund. If you can do a one-on-one for us in terms of program negotiations, I'll be so grateful.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I was just, any background. So from what I've said, it means the fund is coming prepared. And this is where our own candidness and transparency is required. as a first step? And how prepared are we to concede that we do have difficulties, which everybody knows now, we all talk about, right? Now, the first phase of the pre-negotiation started, with the IMF staff visit, if you remember. And they were careful in saying they were in for data collection.
Data collection, yeah.
So what it means is that they came to update, the data, right, from the 2021 Article 4, which I was mentioning. Now they went back, we presented a media review. It didn't win the confidence of the markets. It didn't win. So we had downgrades and others. So I'm giving you the situation in which we are going to the table for the negotiations. If our best bet was an enhanced, program policy, which government has spoken, remember, about before media review, and some of us have said, let us see it, then it has not, unless it has been revised and improved, it has not engendered any confidence in the markets, and from what is happening, even from the Afri-Exim, the expensive nature. So the first discussions will be put what you have on the table.
Okay.
As the fund alluded, fund is always says, fund programs are demand driven, right? Demand driven means the country is expected to make the request, which ultimately, we made. So we would have to have something on the table, similar to the Homegrown, program that we had for the 2014-2015 negotiations. And then the discussions will begin. And normally it will begin with the fiscal. The fiscal is the most challenging, which is having issues for the monetary. And then it will go on to the real sector to look at the energy sector, to look at agri, what is going on in cocoa, with cocoa board, SOEs. And so the structural aspect, which involves the real sector of the economy. Private sector, financing. I think Thompson was talking about some of the issues. But to what extent is Bank of Ghana crowding from 10 billion to 22 billion? What is its impact? And then this would set the preliminary discussions. All that's going to happen, from my experience at these negotiations is very, very preliminary. I do anticipate that, remember, in October, there will be the annual meetings. Yeah. So the Ghana team would follow.
We'll move to
and
Washington.
Either go earlier or stay later, which is a routine we have also done, and then continue. So in terms of real item by item negotiation, beyond the general appraisal which I spoke about, it's likely to begin with the negotiations that will continue, likely at the IMF Article 4. And then depending on how we agree on the numbers and how we agree on the goals that we want to achieve and what we want to do with the elements which we can discuss. Then we can either have a fast track program, or it will be prolonged. IMF negotiations are not normally very fast given the situation in which we are.
Yeah. Mr. Tekpe, the fund is pushing a new ideology where they say that countries that are coming for programs, put your document on the table. Would it change anything for Ghana here? Because some have known that the fund will always be the fund. If your debt is not sustainable, the board will not approve it. If the fund believes that, listen, even though it's a homegrown program or whatever, some say that the buck stops to the fund. This whole idea about generate your own programs and all the rest, where does Ghana lie here in going to these negotiations?
Well, the point is it fair to ask Ghana to generate this program, which is where we came to? And some said that, for example, under the Mahama program, ECF, that we were adamant to go to the fund with the whole program and whatever, as I said. I think Ghanaians have felt that we could manage things on our own. It has always been elusive. So I would say that if it is true that, and I know it's true because, we had a document on the table with which to negotiate a fund program. And if you look at the structural element, you will see things like the sinking fund and the rest, which were in the 2015 budget before, and the fund accepted them. The fund did not take out those things. Of course, you had to tell them how you build a sinking fund and then still have money to reduce the deficit. It's a fair question. So that's what you have to. You want to, because you have a deficit confronting you. We had single spine. We said, fine, we had spread it over 3 years, negotiating with labor. So I think it's just fair. And let's also, realize that the fund is also, an institution that should be, looking to its future. This whole habit of the fund imposing things on countries. And if some developing countries have emerged, and today they are emerging countries, they are middle income, BRICS, and whatever, it all resulted from they being able to put things on the table. So I think what the fund is demanding is not necessarily, after all, that's what it all means to do homegrown or beyond aid. I think it's just a practical. When you get to that point, it means that you have things in your hand to be able to get out of problems and to be able to manage fairly. So I think it's a fair position.
We'll be coming to the issues about our debt and now going forward, what should be our expectations and the approach. Let me bring in Professor Godfrey Bobkin. He's an economist. From your perspective as an economist, going into these negotiations, I mean, we know the problems. What should be the trump card to ensure that we get a program that civil society group is pleased with, a program that an economist like you will be pleased with?
All right, thank you very much, George, and good evening to our cherished viewers. So these are interesting times and challenging, of course. I think I agree largely with Honorable Setekwe. I think it's more about what the country presents. And the country must go to the negotiation knowing very well that the IMF is not ignorant. Okay, they've been with us. They understand the issues. More importantly, because we just exited the 16th IMF program, and their latest report, as Honorable Setekwe said, actually captured what the issues are. So what would shorten the negotiation would be more of transparency and full disclosure, right? And that is why the fund will not impose a program on us, because it's a bit more dangerous if the fund imposes a program on a country. So what it means that if the program doesn't work, the blame goes to the fund. Okay, so but here the fund is asking you to make a diagnosis of the problems, how you see it. And sometimes too, when the fund is asking you to make a diagnosis of the problems, the fund is actually asking you to admit where the problems came from you, right? So that is important. So your own assessment and diagnosis of the issues would inform the extent to which you can implement the program at the end of the day when it's approved. Because the program will not be implemented by the IMF. It's going to be implemented by we ourselves. And that is why they call it Ghana Government Program supported by the fund. So transparency, full disclosure is very important. And we all know that, I mean, there's a way that data speaks, even if you don't love the data, right? And for the IMF, they are driven by the data, right? And because data is their oxygen, right? So, and that is how they do. It's not only with respect to Ghana. So I agree with Honorable Setekwe. Whatever is going to happen with the fund visit to the country from Monday is going to be preliminary, right? It's going to be preliminary. Now, but we do know that, and we'll get there. So once they do the preliminary assessment, it's more so, it will still be updating their records, right? And we know that in terms of the fiscal, a team has been in the country already in terms of the tax experts, and they have engaged with some units with the Ministry of Finance Tax Policy Unit and the rest of them. So it's going to, there will be a breakout, right, which based on their specialties, some will look at agriculture, some will look at our tax policy, the tax handles, the tax gap issues, the tax capacity, fiscal capacity issues would all be looked at, the monetary side and the rest of them. And of course, I also say I agree with Honorable Setekwe because since independence, fiscal policy has been the major source of our macroeconomic instability. And that would also tell you where the focus of the discussion will be. So the focus of the discussion will be more in the area of the fiscal. And when we say so, because it reflects reality, if you look at the posture of Bank of Ghana in the last 2.5 years, you can see a certain posture that suggests that the fiscal side is not responding the way it should in complementing the monetary side. Okay, so and therefore the fiscal side, if you look at it from revenue generation side, then you also want to look at it from expenditure side and then the interaction. So that would dominate the discussion. Now, if you look at we are hopeful. The reason we are hopeful is that already the IMF managing director has told us that by the end of this year, a program will be in place, right? So even at a time when the country hasn't presented its program in the first place, right? But we know from experience that even in the case of the 16th IMF program, when Ghana had a homegrown fiscal consolidation program, also drawing from the Senchi consensus,
Okay.
the application was made in August, and the program kicked in April 3rd, 2015, when the application was made in August 2014. So I agree with Honorable Setekwe that the negotiation can take a little longer, but of course, a lot depends on government's own posture and the transparency with which they want to work with.
Critical points about transparency and all that, but let me come to a critical sector in all these things. Businesses. Ken Thompson, Chief Executive, DALEX, financial space. You've seen it all, you know the problems and all those things. For you, what are your expectations for, I mean, I would say forget about the big English and all those things.
I'm an accountant, so I'll keep it simple.
You know, not you. I'm just saying that for a lot of businesses out there, it's about the environment improving so that I can borrow favorable rates.
Of course.
For you, as government is going in, what is your advice to the team? And what are your expectations to ensure that, listen, at the end of the day, we should make sure that it is not lost out on businesses in this country?
Bottom line is that, in all this, the government represents some forecast of, what it intends to do. And it will be based on assumptions, and someone will look at them and say, I agree or disagree. What I know is that the rates will be high for some time, interest rates will be high for some time.
Oh, we're not going to see any decline anytime soon.
No, I don't think
the fund is coming on board. A program is coming on board.
I think that's another, we are selling, sometimes we're selling a certain hope that does not exist.
Really?
The money that we need to sort ourselves out, the fund can provide it all.
But some would say it's the confidence. It's the fact that people think there's a bigger brother on board now, so I'm comfortable dealing with the country Ghana.
But remember that we've been shut out of the international capital markets.
And it looks like the way things are going.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's not see the fund, the fund as a silver bullet. But, moving forward, so things are going to be tough. Interest rates will be high. What we must try and do is to leave some space for investment. You see, because suddenly the head man has no more money to spend. So if there are no projects, think of all the people that work on the projects. Assuming they are even tarring the road in front of your this office. Think of the number of people that work on the project as day laborers. Think of the people that supply fuel. Think of the people whose machines are rented. Think of the people that sell food to these people. Then take it down to, then those people also have people that they have children they take to school, they support the health service. So this slowdown in economic activity has a huge impact on the private sector, because suddenly there are going to be job losses, the businesses are going to be weak, and it's going to take time for us to recover. So my hope is that the government will be mindful of creating space for investment. All it's saying is that
some are saying that, listen, we've got into a very deep hole now that, listen.
Well, we've got to find a way to collect more tax. If I was...
Are you prepared to pay more? I mean, Mr. Thompson, are you prepared? Someone was saying that, listen.
See, we've talked about two ways that have been used. Transparency.
From Honorable Setekwe and then Probabkin.
Transparent. I don't mind paying the GRA staff, give them 15% bonus. Anything they collect, give them 15%. And if any of you is caught stealing, deal with them, if they are. But we have to do different things because we need to create an environment where we can still invest. Because this is a country with a high unemployment rate. We have large numbers of young people. And if we're not able to create employment, if we're not even able to keep those people in jobs, we have huge social issues. There are huge issues. So no matter what, we've got to find a way to get money to invest. But it's going to be tight. And let's not think that the IMF is coming to solve our problems.
For someone like you, you're not optimistic
No.
I mean, we look at what is happening to Zambia now, and
IMF will never solve our problems. They never said
we've seen their currency stabilized strongly. I mean, there could be other issues as well, but some are saying it's a testament of what a fund program can do for a country.
Well, I mean, if we have been 16 times and it hasn't worked, then must tell you that we're doing something wrong.
Because we went back as like a kid, or that you went back playing again in the sun when you had your back.
It's okay. So it means that the program is not the silver bullet. But the private sector is weak. The private sector is the one that can create jobs. The government, we need to do something different. We have to do something different because we can't afford not to invest in the economy. We can't.
You think the program should create space for
the program?
Fresh?
We have to create space. What's the
How are you going to do that?
Well, so take your income, take your expenditure, take an axe. I'm an accountant. Take an axe to the expenditure. Cut. You got to cut all these unprofitable SOEs. I mean, sell them off in a transparent manner and invest. Invest in this, because unless we do that, we're in trouble. We have to continue investing.
I mean, there's talk about, debt restructuring. And I know for you, you play in this space.
Debt restructuring is the old saying that, I'm going to pay you 100 cedis tomorrow. Let me pay it over 6 months. That's all it is.
It hasn't. You work with funds, you investments and all the rest. There were initial reports that it's going to attack domestic bonds. We're also hearing that government's taking a decision that we won't do that, if anything, external bonds. For you, playing in this financial space, are you worried about, how should these debt restructuring thing be handled to ensure that for companies like yours who are holding people's funds and investing in them, there isn't a run on the whole sector?
Bottom line is that whatever we do, we should not undermine the confidence of people in investing in government securities. That's it. That's fundamental. We have to try and achieve that. Because if I hear that it was a rumor and it's not true, because the moment we touch that, it has serious implications for the whole economy. So whatever you do, don't touch it. Leave it. The loans are the loans. We've got to pay. The expenditure, some we can touch, some we can't touch. We have to deal with the revenue. We have to deal with the revenue. We've got to find a way to mop up any revenue, any tax that we're not currently collecting. We have to find a way. Because, we're in a bad space. And that's all it is.
There are some who ask themselves, and I'll come back to my guest as well on the Zoom, that who would argue and say that, how did we get here?
But it's very simple.
I had a friend 2 days ago who was asking me this question, that how did we get here? There's ballooning, there's talk about restructuring, when you look at the yields on the Eurobonds, and all these things are happening.
If you spend your life, we spend more than we earn. We've been spending more than we earn forever. I remember, a few years ago, we're talking about smart borrowing. And what we're told was that, and this is, I have to go back to this, because they told us that, we'll take dollars and to buy CD debt, because the dollars are cheap. The dollars at that time maybe was 6%. They are cheap, and then that helped us to, stabilize our CD, and the dollars kept flowing. And a simple analysis, which I did, very simple, showed that even if you conservatively calculated how much you would pay, based on conservative estimates of depreciation and inflation, it was more than 3 times what we paid, what we took. So, look, it is what it is. We spend the money. We're in debt. The people, we have to find a way to pay the debt. We've got to find a way to survive.
Are businesses prepared to tighten their belt to support? Some are saying, listen, we've done what we are supposed to do. Why should I, as a businessman, again, be taking on this extra burden these times? If there's any burden, it should be held by those who are managing the economic space.
But it's Ghanaians that are managing the space. Yeah. It's the businesses and those Ghanaians that form the economy. So it's not an issue about whether businesses should take any burden. The issue is that it's tough, and you've got to survive, because there are people that are employed. People have families. And there are real social consequences if we don't manage this properly. So,
you think we shouldn't touch the social intervention programs?
Social intervention programs?
Yeah, maybe. No.
Well, you take an axe to the expenditure. If you can't afford it...
Free SHS?
Free SHS means test it. Do something. But you can't, say if you do the same things, expect different results, you are mad. We've done the same thing all these years. We get into trouble 16 times. This time, let's do
I
something.
get from you that you're not that optimistic about this whole quote noise about IMF program.
No. I mean, I think that IMF, so what? It's us. What's it got to do with the IMF? I mean, when we overspend, is it the IMF that does it? All the IMF is going to do is to hold the stick and say, okay, fine, this is what you agreed to do, and this is what you're going to do. And then the IMF has given you some money. Of course, it's got to make sure that you're able to pay that money back. Mm-hmm. And that's all it is. That's all it is. That's all it is. It's not about the IMF, it's about Ghana and what we want to achieve.
Someone saying that we knew all these things, but we've gotten here. That we knew that you can't take on projects that you don't have revenue to finance.
Look, we're just indisciplined. We're indisciplined. And that's the consequence of being indisciplined. We're just indisciplined. We're all indisciplined. I mean, we're indisciplined. You do projects, go around the country. You start from your front door, no more projects have been abandoned.
There are a lot of projects going
yes, abandoned. And you've taken loans for these projects. What did you expect? You've taken money to pay salaries. What did you expect? I mean, the free SHS. I mean, I don't have an issue with free SHS, but you've got to remember that if you spend, there is 3 years SHS, the person goes to university 4 years, then another 1 year national service, assuming, so minimum maybe 3 years. It's going to take time for that person to start contributing to that national income. So you can't fund it with 5 year money. You can't.
Let me bring in Mr. Honorable Setekpe, Finance Minister, for you. And now let's pick on the issues. Some are saying that this fund program thing will all be about our debts, and our debts. And some are saying that, listen, George, quite tough times ahead. Nobody should be, quote, use my words carefully, fooled that is going to be a rosy thing for us. Tough times really lies ahead for us.
Let me make 2 points. We are talking about debt today because if you remember, I did a program and I said our budget was debt dependent. It isn't that we have not borrowed in the past. In fact, all the advanced countries borrow to finance their budgets. Usually they target capital expenditure and then they are able to finance their recurrent expenditure. But we are talking about debt today because, one, we don't have access to the external markets anymore. So we cannot go and get sovereign bond. We are talking about debt because we must finance the budget and we cannot depend on the non-residents who were coming in and buying our domestic bonds, even though we called it domestic, which we wanted to make a hybrid and say there's a foreign component and a domestic component. We are talking about debt, because compensation and interest is taking everything, and it means that the rest of the expenditure, the rest of the budget is dependent on debt. We're talking about debt because there are auction failures or shortfalls, right? Because if you can't get external, it means that you have to borrow domestic, which has implications for private sector. But simply that, now you've turned to the domestic market and your domestic market is not big enough to finance your huge expenditure. But the second point, that's why we're talking about debt. And then we are getting ratings, and therefore our ability to go to the external markets is getting, it's completely vanished, right, as considered by the government itself. Now, the second point is, I think it's a mistake to do bottom-up analysis from debt. Because as Ken said, what gave you debt? Your revenue minus your expenditure, right, which gives you your budget deficit, plus your arrears, which gives you your fiscal balance. All these are lower than your revenue. We said we'll collect 100 billion. We've reduced it to 96. Some of us said we may be lucky to get 80, 85.
But Honorable, I want to make just a quick...
Let me just, if I may just land logically. So, and the gap between the 100 and 137 expenditure is what we want to finance, 37. And we are unable to finance. Before the middle of the year, Bank of Ghana had to come in. Bank of Ghana is now financing 22 billion of that 37 because you cannot go and borrow any longer. This is a problem. You see what I'm talking about? Before, in the media review, Bank of Ghana was financing 22 billion. Let's put aside whether they were printing money or using their own resources and weakening their balance sheet, to talk as an accountant. The truth is that Bank of Ghana has started financing 2/3 of the deficit. And if you reckon with government documents coming out now that the arrears is understated, then it means the Bank of Ghana is financing about half of 40 billion. This is a Bank of Ghana that came from zero financing of the budget in 2016 to 2020. And all of a sudden it gave 10 for the whole year and now 22 billion. Where are we ending the year? Is Bank of Ghana going to finance 30 billion out of, because remember you are borrowing. So I think that, as Ken said, the issue is revenue and expenditure. And then also, if you borrow, lend to pay, which is the logic behind, something like the sinking fund. Oil is new to the budget. So we're saying that let's use it to tackle some of our policies. You can't continue borrowing. That's a structural change. When you talk about structural change, it means that you are changing the structure in which you did things in the past. Now we have Ukraine war. Now you have the, You have the advanced countries from the US to UK to the EU, increasing interest rates as we speak. Between yesterday, today, and going forward into Friday, our own, fellow Ghanaian name, Mr. Kwatin, back in the UK is in the saddle and going to be increasing interest rate. It's going to affect the cost of borrowing, which means that if you are restructuring not in the context of the period when there was easy money as a result of the quantitative easing, but at a period when the advanced countries are tightening. So the domestic is unfavorable, the external is unfavorable. Yes, you have to then take one by one what is leading to the debt. You are borrowing and you are not repaying. You stop the stabilization fund. As we speak today, if with all this Ukraine crisis, the interest rates, we don't have any buffer to fall on. And we said countries establish buffers so that when they are in trouble, we had 3 oil fields. We did not enhance the buffer. We'd rather run it down. With 1 oil field, we built some of these buffers. Mind you, these are tools which the countries that emerge have been using. They are not strange, Self-financing. Let me give you a very practical example, so that we can put things in context. Terminal 3, there's an airport tax. And we said, yes, we need a terminal. It is becoming less. That airport tax is in dollars. So why should we? So we ring-fence the dollars to pay, for the dollar debt. And we didn't have to issue a sovereign bond because it was not going to be dependent, on the cedis that we generate, which we have to exchange and the rest, dollar for dollar, right? Same with NPS, Thermoport, and whatever. Those are some of the elements. I don't want to. We can talk about some of the elements more. So it was dollar for dollar, which countries do. I was in the U.S. Treasury and asked them whether the Treasury could keep, forex, and of course they said, why not? How do we manage the dollar against the euro? How do we do our investments overseas and the rest? We have, forex position. So government did not have forex position. Bank of Ghana position is not government position. Of course, the petroleum funds became, when I say government, fiscal position in forex. And that's what we're building, right? So in sum, what I'm saying is that, yes, debt is going to be a key issue because if you don't restructure, you default, where we are now, right? That is why debt is center stage. But remember, the solution to debt is also structural. It has to tackle revenue. You have to look at your domestic tax system, especially the automation, which was stopped after, we did the external one, we did the customs one, which was single window, West Blue, however you may call it, now ICOMS. There is no domestic equivalent. That was going to be phase 2. So it's not about small entities not paying taxes. Our tax to GDP ratio is hanging around 12-13%. When some of our middle income colleagues, the lower middle income colleagues in Africa are doing 16 to 17%. So there is a gap. I think that is the issue. So where is that gap? That is a gap that is dependent on our structure of the economy, which we must go after. Then you can think going forward, if you fill that gap, then you can think going forward, stabilizing it with things like the automation, which I'm talking about, things like training, and the rest. We revamped all our tax laws. We are collecting less revenue from, I'm picking 2 or 3 of the policies, which would have to be reviewed, which will be on the table. If you take the benchmark, you've slashed 50% of the value of imports, right? Straight away, what it means is that if you were multiplying 100, by 5 and getting 500, all of a sudden you are multiplying that 100 now by 50. You are using 50 and multiplying, you are getting 250. It's a shortfall in revenue, right? So again, with the banter between, AGI and Guta and others, depending on whether you are an importer and you want cheap importer. But we have also exposed domestic industry, domestic firms, because their protection from import duty has suddenly gone down. These are some of the nitty-gritty. So you see that the problem, that is just the result, the outcome, of revenue expansion, and that's it. And some of us have said right from the 17 that we cannot finance free SHS unfettered. We always qualify unfettered. And I think that is what, others, talk about, things like means testing and the rest, and, but it's not, because, George, practically speaking, I'm learning, practically speaking, our parents today not buying food for their kids? Are the contractors who supply even 1 meal, let alone 3 meals in boarding schools, are they not saying that they are not being paid? Mind you, that is a private sector. Government is not paying them. So when you talk about private sector, those contractors are the private sector, right? And they are not being paid because, because of the huge arrears that we have, which must be disclosed. And that is regular budget arrears, not to talk about bailout costs despite ESLA, both energy and, So to sum up, debt is the product of something, but debt is the issue that is facing us critically from our situation worsening. And that is why we are talking about refinancing and the rest. But the program would have to look to the structural side, beginning with revenue, expenditure, management of arrears, giftness, contract database, all those initiatives, and then move on, to look at the sectors. But you cannot manage the sector when government is not paying the private sector. When government is not providing subsidy for fertilizer, how do you manage agri? Everything is coming back to the fiscal.
I'll be coming back to you because I want your thoughts. And again, when you hear the thoughts of Ken Thompson here, he says that, listen, as a businessman, he's willing to pay in terms of the taxes to address the problem. But I'll be coming back to you. But let me bring in Prof. Bokping. The issue about revenue, and I'll come back to the second because he's a tax person. Why are we so struggling with the issue of revenue that today, because you are shut from the international market, we are struggling to raise money to finance our budget, the city depreciation and all the rest. Why can't we get around this challenge of raising the required revenue to support our expenditure? Is it about cutting down the expenditure or what? Because if you look at the GDP numbers, the economy is expanding. How can we get around the challenge of revenue, Prof?
All right, thank you very much. So I think it's very basic, right? So we, since independence, we had developed this appetite of low-hanging fruits, spend more, generate less, run to the market and borrow. Generate less, spend more, run to the market. This is Ghana. And we haven't been able to plan outside the box. And the matter we are talking about here, George, is the same that took us to IMF in 1965.
Really?
Under Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Yeah.
A few days ago, we did a memorial.
You will find debt on sustainability. Yeah, you will find debt on sustainability in there. Even though when the program was approved, Dr. Nkrumah rejected it. So his name is not mentioned. You will find the same issue 1966. The first major economic decision we took after overthrow of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was to go to the IMF. You will find that in the 16th IMF program from April 3rd, 2015 to April 2019. So that's why I agree with Honorable Setekwe that debt is the outcome of our fiscal indiscipline, excessive expenditure. And even if you look at the size of our economy, relative to other middle income countries, we are not even spending that much. Look, there's conventional wisdom in spending to stimulate the economy. We're also talking about the expenditure rationalization. In which area should it go? Growth enhancing spending, as Mr. Ken Thompson was talking about, right? But our expenditure is heavily recurrent, right? Consumption based. So if you continue like that, then the advice will not be spend more in that direction, right? So how do you rebalance that expenditure? Because part of that may not be that you should cut down the expenditure. How do you rebalance that? And I think in all of these things, we sometimes we major on the minor. And the reason I say so is that, can Ghana afford to have that size of government, even in challenging times like this? What is it that we can save? Can we realistically adopt a lean government, probably less than 60 ministers? Look at the state-owned enterprises. Now we are creating deputy CEOs across a number of them. We are increasing the cost centers and the cost drivers. And then we can look at the procurement infractions manifesting explicitly in corruption. And studies have shown that we lose annually more than $3 billion. Then we can, can we afford as a country to close our eyes on all of these things and to talk about free senior high school, which from 2017 to date, we have spent just around 7.5 billion cedis. Actually, in current dollar terms, less than $1 billion. So those are the issues. Then so if you look at the expenditure side, okay, you want to look at where the concentration is. I think the size of government is unbearable. And if as at now, we are unable to take that bold decision and adopt a lean government and free up some space, which we can channel into growth enhancing spending, then you could not go to investors and ask them to take a haircut. You must come to the table clean. And then you want to talk about, so you see, when Honorable Setekwe was talking about the benchmark revaluation, you want to look at the politically connected businesses in that import value chain, right? So once that revaluation lends to their benefit, the gains, they internalize that at that level. Then so even if you look at our tax handles, and Honorable Setekwe, he knows more about that. Even VAT, the level of inefficiency, you can also trace that to exemptions over the years. Even when we assured the IMF as part of the exit conditions that we're going to pass the exemption bill, we hurriedly sent that to Parliament. But it wasn't really our plan to pass that. So it stayed in Parliament longer than e-levy bill. Okay. When in 2019, the president had told us that the biggest threat to our domestic revenue drive has been the exemption. And we were losing billions of cedis from there and all of that. Then you want to look at other tax handles. So if you look at Ghana, let me summarize it this way. The gaps exist more at the administrative and compliance level, less at the policy level. Okay, so how do we focus a little bit more on compliance? Okay, deploy greater digitization, take a little bit of the human intervention out of the equation. And in fact, there's actually room. We don't need to ask Mr. Ken Thompson to pay a little bit more. We could actually generate a lot more tax revenue without burdening the faithful few. Okay, that's the way to go, because if you look at the gaps, once the gaps exist more at the administrative and compliance level and not at the policy level, then what it means is that the leakages really are things that reflect in individual pocket and not in the state.
So I get from you that for you it's about efficiency. Mr. Thompson, again, he draws a very significant point about being prudent with our expenditure. And there was a recent Goldman Sachs document that talked about, even the seriousness of government in reaching a program and all. For you as a business person, again, he comes to the point that, listen, efficiency might be enough. I don't need to come to dealers to pay more. Are you convinced, or are you encouraged by government posture and expenditure and all the rest that would even challenge if today they bring you a bill that we did an assessment of your operations and pay more.
Well, are you asking whether I'm convinced about government posturing?
In terms of expenditure,
you know,
and asking companies
honestly,
to pay more in terms of revenue.
I mean, I won't take it out of government. I won't take us as Ghanaians. We're not serious. I don't think we really are serious about wanting to address the issues.
But we give the power to government to
But-
act
but
on our
who's
behalf. We voted them into power to act on their behalf.
The government reflects us. The people in government, they reflect us.
Really?
Of course, the government reflects the
I'm
people.
not saying that you ceded your power to them to do things on your behalf.
But what I'd say is that the good thing, at least this time around, is there's a bit more debate. And I'm glad that young people are getting involved in the debate. Because we have to start, if we want a certain kind of lifestyle, we've got to change our mindset. You know, where we are now, there are three things that we can do. You either increase income, cut expenditure, or do all three. That's
You
all
think cutting expenditure now would help?
increase income, cut expenditure, or do both. Three things.
Okay.
Government posturing is about us Ghanaians. What do we really want? But we're not serious. But I know that the young people, you know, now are much more informed about the issues. At least it's moved on, and hopefully they can start to talk about it more, and we can get our leaders to do exactly what we want them to do to get the life that we all desire. You know, but we really are not.
Getting the light there with them. Second Thompson is Chief Executive of DLX Finance. Setekpe is the former Minister of Finance, and Professor Godfrey Bokpeng is an economist and finance lecturer, talking about the IMF Programme Negotiations and whether we can indeed get a good deal. That's the question I'll be answering after this break. Asking, what can we do from the business perspective, from an economist and a former Minister of Finance, and currently he's a technocrat and also been working with the IMF. This is PM Express Business Edition. Be right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we discuss the IMF program that on Monday, the team will start engaging government about having this enhanced domestic program. But the critical question that we are now is that, can we get a good deal? A deal that would maybe benefit some of us, bring some excitement, turn around the economy, or a deal that will see some serious austerity. Honorable Setekwe is a former Minister of Finance and also worked with the IMF, and he's still working with the IMF, and he'll get us some details there. Professor Godfrey Bokpeng is an economist, and he'll be sharing the thought with us in terms of an economist, and Ken Thompson is Chief Executive of DLX, as we also gauge the thoughts of businesses and what are their expectations. And that critical question about getting a good deal. I mean, what is even a good deal?
You know,
some will say. From the businessman perspective, Ken.
I mean, if I was put in a room with the IMF,
what are you going to tell them?
all I'm going to say is that,
What are you going to tell them?
I'll say, guys, here's the deal. This is my income. This is how I'm going to get it. I'll show them the assumptions I've made. I'll show them how I'm going to achieve the income. I said, this is my expenditure. This is what I'm going to do. The money you give me, this is where it will go. I'm showing you a schedule that shows that I have money to invest in my country and to support indigenous businesses. These are my assumptions. I've done all the work. You test the assumptions, they are correct, and they'll say, thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. That's it. What else are you going to do? It's all going to be based on assumptions. But my objective will be to promote indigenous business, protect jobs, promote indigenous businesses, and to create employment. That's my objective.
But someone said the reality is that even if this debt restructuring thing is anything to go by, and it wouldn't touch even local papers and external, the reality is that some will say that we see an austerity ahead of us.
No, but you're not listening to me.
Yeah, I'm listening.
You're not listening to me. You're not listening to me.
I'm listening.
I do spreadsheets
Okay.
I do spreadsheets every day. That's my job.
Okay.
I have income. I say, Mr. I'm income of 1,000 cedis. I'm telling you that my expenditure is going to be 700. And the person say, but your income was 600 last time. How are you going to go to 1,000? I say, these are my assumptions, and this is what I'm going to achieve. My expenditure, your expenditure was 1,000, 1.5, whatever, 1,500. How are you going to go to 700? Say, these are my assumptions, because at the back of my mind, I want to be able to support indigenous businesses by investing, and I want to create employment for my people. And of course, if I'm going to cut expenditure, there's going to be sacrifices. What is going to happen is all they'll do is test the assumptions. That's what you do. That's all you can do.
Protect jobs, protect
That is my objective.
business.
That is my create jobs. I will still want to grow the economy, so I need money to invest. I know I need to cut down expenditure, and I also know I need to increase income, and that'll be based, it's all assumptions. And I'm going to base assumptions, and I'm going to show you why I've made those assumptions, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to make those assumptions work for me.
I remember some years ago, you talked about our debt situation.
You know, I said some years ago, I said we're going to end up with, a legacy of debt or a legacy of austerity. But that's by the by. The money's been spent. We're in a hole. We've got to stop digging. That's all we have to do.
Let me bring it.
It's all about assumptions. That's all it is.
Honorable Setekbe, can we get a good deal? And even some would say that, what is a good deal?
Ken, sorry, George.
Don't worry.
Ken, yes. Now I was going to go to Ken. Ken has put, as I said from the beginning, that negotiation is about what you put on the table. And Ken has taken it a stage further. One, at the table, there will be technical people. And if you say that I want to increase my revenue, tax revenue, currently at around 12-13%, and I want to increase it to 15%, it is up to GRA to come to the table with the technical people on the side after the plenary and tell them what tax measures are we going to put in place to increase the tax to GDP ratio from 13% to 15%. That is what some of them used to do, before I went to the fund, at the back of the table. Remember National Revenue Secretariat, and they still do it. And that is the capability of our institutions. And that's why we must build the capacity of our institutions. Customs is able to tell you from a long time ago, from the SAP-ERP days, what they call the effective duty rate. Any policy that you have and you put it on the table, they can plug it into the trend, the projections which they have been making over the years, and tell you it will result in valuation coming down by so much. It will result in, therefore raising so much revenue. Then IRS, which is now Domestic Tax Division of the GRA, they also have their numbers, and they will tell you the constraints. So what is it that we need, right, to achieve these goals? Remember, at the table, that is where you have the World Bank, that is where you have the African Development Bank, who are more into the real sector, who are more into providing assistance with money. So when we wanted to do gift means, it was the World Bank that came in. George, you have attended all those meetings, right? It's the World Bank that comes in with the money for the modernization, right? So the fund comes with the thinking. I'm saying that practically what we are saying is what, but the issue is this, sustainability. Why is the fund effective? The fund is effective because the fund comes in, you have a momentary problem, right? And they come in, you give them all these nice projections. You bring in controller, you bring in Bank of Ghana, how are we going to finance it? You bring in budget division, you bring in real sector, energy, they come in, how are we going to, make sure that we resolve this energy, thing that is hanging on our heads. We didn't bring in private sector, including Chamber of Commerce, Association of Bankers. The fund will meet all these people. And so it's a collective. But, so why is the fund effective? The fund is effective because, yes, okay, we have agreed on the numbers. There's something we call conditionalities. The first element of it is prior action. Show me that you are serious. So even before the disbursement is done, if you done prior to, the action is taking place, you have to show good faith that you are able to do so and so, and you meet it, because otherwise you won't get your disbursement. And remember, you need the money. So the disbursement becomes the motivation. This is why, if you listen carefully to the country director, the IMF restaurant, in his parting message, he said he knows that Ghana will get out of this situation because we have been out of the short-term situations in the past 16 times. If we didn't, we wouldn't get the money. And so we do what is required for us to get. The second one is the performance criteria, which is spread for which reason they come and do what you call the reviews. You remember the reviews? So in fact, the last ECF, 8 reviews. We always do a minimum of 7 to 8 reviews, all the fund programs. So over the 3-year period, they will fix dates. That's the fund fixes dates. They come in and they see whether the condition you say you will meet by the end of the year, you have met it. 2, the condition you say you will meet by the end of middle of next year, you have met it. The condition you say you will meet all the way, usually in 6 months intervals. And the disbursement is no longer going to be like the ECF, sorry, it's not going to be like the COVID loan where you got 1 billion upfront, or SDR where you got 1 billion upfront. It's going to be in tranches now. That's where the expression tranche comes. So it's broken down into tranches. Now the question is, if we are able to succeed within these short-term horizons all the time, then what can we do ourselves to sustain that revenue? We were able to increase the revenue, if not by 2% to maybe 1.8%, which is fair performance. Everybody is behind GRA, meetings are held, and GRA makes sure that they need that, because otherwise you won't get the money. Right now, you need the money, right? Expenditure. Yes, we do cut expenditure. There's no fund program where we have not cut expenditure before. None, right? But the fund itself became sensitive and started talking, read Article 4. Even with the COVID, they were talking about the sensitive sectors of the economy being protected, and that government had not protected them.
And so for you, the social programs will be protected, right?
Precisely, and it started with Ghana, Punks Card. You remember Punks Card?
Yeah.
Program of adjustment to, yes. It started with Ghana. Ghana has had a very long experience with it. So those are protected. And that is where, in our case, if you remember, the pension program was protected. Other programs, were protected, right? Because the program is an austerity program and it is harsh on low-income, persons. In sum, what I'm trying to say is that if you want to win ourselves with the fund, then you have to ask yourself, what do you do structurally to maintain your revenue performance? What do you do structurally to keep that discipline? This is where the idea behind, the section of the Public Financial Management Act, which was taken out and built into the Fiscal Responsibility, Act. The 5%, that's the basis. So we are telling ourselves that in order that, from our experience, it means that all the time the fund brings us from 10%, 8%, down to somewhere around 6%. So maybe 5% is the sustainable mark that we need, right? So we put it in law. We couldn't respect it. We tell ourselves that from treasury bills to everything, George, the entire $1 billion US dollars sovereign bond that we got in 2015 was used to do on a refinancing. In other words, we did our own internal, restructuring. We paid off treasury bills that were hanging for so many years instead of three. We paid off. We used part of that 250 to pay off the first sovereign bond. 250 million of that amount was used to pay the first sovereign bond. Then we created the sinking fund to take off up to the remaining 200 million was used. These are the structural measures, because you are telling yourself, I have been borrowing, and all I do is that I borrow and then I roll over. I borrow and I roll over. Excuse my language, Ken is more into this, So you say, let us build a sinking fund the same way Philippines and others have done, and they have investment grade in the market. Maybe, I don't know if they say that, but they have that discipline. And the thing was in our constitution, yet we never established it. Because if you are borrowing, the danger is that we have been borrowing and we have not been paying. So we set up the sinking fund. And I'm telling you some of the achievements. Okay, now another point of sustainability, right, is this. How are you going to sustain it? That is usually not on the table, because the fund is short-term focused. You have asked them to come and help you short-term. And we say one of our problems is that, yes, we may succeed with luck when commodity prices are high. But maybe after the fund program, commodity prices will fall, right? So let us put in a counter-cyclical policy. You see the origin of the stabilization fund? so that when the hard times comes, we can fall on it. And let me give you a practical example. Look, every government that goes to the IMF goes because of fiscal challenges and debt. You remember the PIGS, Portugal, Ireland, Greece, and Spain during the global financial crisis. They went to the fund, right? Ever since the Second World War, they never went to the fund, but they went to the fund because they were having issues with Germany and the rest as part of the EU. Did they go back to the fund during COVID? They learned their lesson. None of those countries went back to the fund during COVID. And then imagine the Latin American tigers and others that used to go to the fund. So these are some of the things that they do, which we have incorporated in our law, in our PFMA and in our PRMA. If we want to avoid the 18th program, we are going to do the 17th. These are the measures. It's no magic. That is what the Eastern European countries that we were market economies before them, such as Croatia and the rest who are now in the EU and are giving us loans. Those are the measures they put in place. Dubai has a Dubai fund, so why can't we get our infrastructure fund to also do the magic? That is that. So I'm saying that the issue why the fund is effective because we are salivating to get our money. So we'll do everything that the fund that we agree, not the fund imposes, that we agree with the fund, to do in terms of plan actions, performance criteria, and the rest. Then the fund leaves, then and you could hear, you remember, and I'm addressing Ghanaians generally now because when we exited the fund in quotes, if you remember, there were concerns. And it was very concerning statements like, let's leave the fund so that we can borrow. Right? It was made in the political economy, environment. And that is where the borrowing has landed us now. We stopped the refinancing, the stuff. As I said, if the Ukraine war and whatever, God, and all those things that are happening, we don't have any buffer. We're building the buffers. We took 250 million of our own money from the stabilization fund. What if we had increased it with 3 oil fields, as I've been saying, to 700 million? That's when you go to the fund not for 1 billion, but you go for 250. That is the balance of it. That's how you exit. So I just want to say that these are, what makes the fund successful in helping us out of our problem, and why we fall back again, and we are not able. This because we are unable to sustain the discipline that we pledged to do when we are in a fund program.
Prof. Bokwin, for you as an economist and for that man at the Bosokai who would ask and all the rest, can we get a program, Prof. Bokwin,
Yes,
that
I'm
say
here.
that it is a good deal?
Look, George, I don't know why suddenly we are talking about getting a good program or a good deal.
A favorable
from the IMF
deal,
program.
a favorable program.
Okay. So what? And why are you talking about a favorable program? You walked yourself into this situation, and then suddenly, by placing a call to the IMF, you want a favorable program. Things to just change overnight. George, even the first important hurdle before an IMF program can be held up from achieving limited effectiveness. We have not crossed that.
Which is?
Which is our debt sustainability.
Okay.
DSA, as we speak, there is no way Ghana government can meet its future financial obligations without a sharp adjustment to our income and expenditure patterns and our financing decisions.
Prof. Bokwin, let me
There's
cut
no
in
way.
here. Sorry, just a quick one. I mean, we are hearing that government has taken a decision that they won't touch the local papers, irrespective of the outcome of the debt sustainability report by the IMF and the World Bank. Are you convinced by what we are picking up?
So that is a decision for government to take, but then you have to demonstrate. How do you bring your debt to a more sustainable level for an IMF program to be effective? So you have to demonstrate the alternative. Okay, so because baseline debt restructuring in one form or the other is unavoidable, right? So if you don't want to do it in the domestic debt, but of course, look, it's logical. The question is, if you look at the yields on the domestic debts across the various instruments, and you look at where inflation is, 33.9%, the real return is already negative.
Negative. And I'll come to Mr.
So
Thompson
if people
on that one as well.
people seek early redemption of their investment today, they'll eat less, they'll get less in terms of the value today. So what else do you want to, there is no hair to be taken away from that, actually. Okay, but probably you want to look at maybe in terms of the principal, the tenure, the profiling, or whatever. But of course, you also want to look at the external debt. If you touch that, technically it's a default. And it's going to affect your ability to enter the international capital market. And I agree with Honorable Setek. Look, we are in this mess because we don't have market access. And if you look at the posture of government, which was also consistent with their position right from 2017, and of course, it's not unique because government go and borrow. It's quickly, as much as possible, within the shortest possible time, enter the market to go and borrow. Okay, so even when reluctantly they agree to do this program, it was more about how do we leverage on the IMF program to get the credibility and enter the market. And that is why it's a bit difficult for government to embrace restructuring, right? There's been a pushback all this while. So, but you need to clear that important hurdle. Your interest payment to tax revenue is taking more than 60%. Okay, and if you add compensation to that, it's 116% of your tax revenue. How do you change that and free up space for priority spending? You have to demonstrate
so Prof, I get your argument about the debt being cleared, the debt issue being dealt with first. But again, back to my question again, that can we get a program that will put smiles on the face of the CSOs, that man at Abosuokai, that student that you teach at level 100, or listen, brace yourself
is my
for
position.
Tough times, the reality.
This is my position based on the data. Things are going to get a little bit worse before they improve. Fiscal adjustment under these current circumstances would impose some cost. And that cost would have to be passed through the system. So let's not create some hope that doesn't exist. Let's not tell Ghanaians that suddenly because the IMF is in town, things are just going to turn green overnight. No, these are challenging times. And look, the way we are looking at it, it probably will not take us less than 4 years. If you look at where we are now, look, because the reason I'm saying so, in 2014, when we started the negotiation with the fund, our debt to GDP ratio wasn't as precarious as it is right now. Our debt service to revenue ratio wasn't like what we have it right now, okay? But look at where, even if you look at across all the debt sustainability indicators, from solvency to liquidity, you see where the country is. And because the IMF program is short, right, there will be some kind of fiscal adjustment that would impose costs, and that probably would not leave a lot of space for growth enhancing spending. And because you also just suddenly can't change your revenue dynamics from 13% to about 15 or 17% in a year or so. No, it doesn't work that way.
Let me bring in Mr. Thompson. I mean, when you hear these things from the economist, I mean, you're a finance accountant and you play with the numbers. Do you get worried because the focus or the projection is that, listen, brace yourself for an emergency landing. It wouldn't be a smooth one.
Do I get worried? Well, it is what it is. I'm not particularly worried. When I say I'm not particularly worried, what I mean is I'm not going to...
You've seen it all.
No, I'm not going to stand like a rabbit caught in the headlights of a car. I'm going to keep talking. We all going to talk, try and see what we can do to manage the situation until we get out. But it's going to be tough. That's what it's just going to be tough.
Are businesses prepared to absorb these shocks? Because maybe you have built the buffers. Others out there, that man at Abosuokai.
Or businesses will collapse.
Really?
Of course they'll collapse. I mean, even just by the cedi depreciating by over 60% up to now. People have lost their working capital. Yes.
Job losses?
Yes. Think of people that are doing projects. So their project was $2 million at the beginning of the year, which was maybe times 6, 12. Now, times 10. Where do you get the difference from? But we've got to manage. First, manage the news, manage our expectations, ensure that if we're prepared to be disciplined and serious, there will be light at the end of the tunnel. But we are not, as we speak, we're not disciplined and we're not serious. We're not. We're just not as a people, we're not. We're incapable of disciplining ourselves. That's why we need somebody every 4 years come and hold a stick. And then as soon as, we get better, we start to misbehave. But let's just hope that this time round, after the pain, because there's going to be a lot of pain, we can start to now build a better country, because we all got involved and we all decided that, this time we're going to behave ourselves. But we're just indisciplined.
Let me try and wrap up, and Mr. Tekpe, in 2 minutes, your parting words for us. I know the team should be in town this weekend, and Monday the work will start. Your final thoughts to Ghanaians, to the team, and those who are overly optimistic.
George, I don't know if I heard you right, but are you saying that, we as Ghanaians, led by our government, are the ones who are reversing the situation and setting conditions or preconditions for the negotiations in terms of what we will do and what we will not do? Have we forgotten that whoever pays the piper calls the tune? We need the money. So I can't see the irony in it. And we may be making the same mistake as winning ourselves of the IMF. Will never go back to the fund. When in actual fact, in 2020, after we exited, with the first shock, we were among the first nations to rush to go and get a COVID loan. The test of stability is not when times are good, when you have 3 oil fields and the rest. It's when you face the challenges. So I would say that if it is true that certain lines are being drawn, right, that cannot be crossed, well, they better be feasible lines. Because if they are not feasible, because take a number which is floating, 7 billion, for a period of what? Nearly 6 years or so for free SHS. How come, headmasters are talking? How come that food contractors are talking? And how come we use 2 billion Ghana cedis out of the sovereign bond we did in 2019 to support free SHS payment? Just work out the percentage. This is what I mean by candid and transparent. Is 7 billion a real figure? Right? Bailout costs, some were put in footnotes below the line. Some of us kept saying for a long time. In the end, the IMF brought it above the line and adjusted the numbers. So I would say, in closing, that it may not be a good posture to go to a negotiation, with set preconditions, unless you are capable of meeting those conditions and the other things that you would have to do. I think the situation is there. It's not. I don't mean to scare anyone, but the situation is as Prof said, it's worse than when we did recent programs. You can take from J. Kufuor's His Excellency's program. Of course, you can say there was epic flows behind that program into Data Mills program, into the Mahama. You can look at the indices for all those periods. The situation is worse, and we have been having downgrades. And so let me just say that the markets are watching. And if we fail, with the budget in coming out with very solid, positions with the fund, then our situation will be worse and we'll be going into deeper. But we should not be setting preconditions. In my humble view, I think we should go, and negotiate very hard. We know the numbers. Ghanaians know the numbers, right? We know, for example, a number that's floating around, that the pipeline for projects alone was about 77 billion, 24 billion was paid, and we are sitting on 53 billion. How much of this is in Ministry of Finance? Averagely, it could be 8 to 10 billion. Yet in the budget, we have only 1.9 billion.
Yeah. Yes. So, Prof. Balkin, in 2 minutes, your parting words, or even a minute, if you can.
Look, George, these are challenging times. We need to stay together. We need to rally behind government. but we also require that government to be more transparent. My humble appeal to the president is that, Mr. President, take a bold decision, reduce the number of ministers, cut that down as a signal that the austerity is first biting right in front of you, and ask Ghanaians to come on board. Let's not set conditions for the fund. We have to demonstrate to the fund how we'll be able to get out of this. The fund will be okay with that. It will get along with us. But I think things are going to get a little bit worse. I think it's going to affect the private sector more. And it's going to affect the growth, inclusive growth.
Yeah.
And it has implication for job creation.
Okay.
It has implication for public sector employment recruitment in the next 2-3 years.
Okay. Let me come to your final words. Just your final words, please. 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Just keep hope alive. The young people, we have a lot of young people get involved. Seek to knowledge. Understand. Push the people in power, whoever they may be, because you make up Ghana. You are the future. Never give up. Never give up.
Never give up. How to soon you have to draw the curtains down as we get ready for that program negotiations to start on Monday morning between the IMF and the government. And let's see what will come out for you and I as you looked at the IMF program negotiations with my distinguished guest, Ken Thompson, Honorable Finance Minister, former Finance Minister Ken, that is Setekpe, and Godfrey Bokping, an economist. My name is George Wiafe. You have been PM Express. Have a great day.